Hello, everybody. My name is Alicia Ford. My role is National Disability Coordination Officer, and I'm collaborating with ADCET on this event. I want to welcome you to this session, Levelling Up Your Online Teaching with Universal Design for Learning, and our presenter, Dr. Erin Leif. Please note that information about captioning and etiquette for this session to run smoothly are in the chat and on the ADCET UDL Symposium page. This session is being recorded. If you don't want to be on screen on the recording, please turn your camera and mic off for the session. However, our presenter Erin will invite you to interact in the workshop using the raise hand function when you would like to speak or ask a question. When you do turn your mic on to speak, please ensure that your surrounding environment is quiet. And don't forget to tag us on your socials with hashtag UDL Symposium 2023. This session is being live captioned. We also have captions available via browser, which will now be added to the chat box. Over to you, Erin.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Erin Leif, and I'm a senior lecturer at Monash University in the School of Educational Psychology and Counseling. I'm really excited for the opportunity to speak with you all today about my approach to online teaching that incorporates the principles of universal design for learning. My team and I have used this approach across 8 6-point postgraduate behavior science units that are primarily delivered online to a really diverse group of students. And the exciting thing is that student feedback has consistently been really positive, with students rating the units as meeting or exceeding their expectations. The feedback scores consistently meet or exceed faculty and university-wide expectations. And students really enjoy the course and have good outcomes. So because of the success that we've experienced, now I feel like I need to tell everybody about it. So thank you all for being here today. This session is going to be a little bit more interactive than some of the earlier sessions today because this is a workshop. I do invite you to keep your cameras on if you would like. I'm more than happy to see faces and invite you to have your cameras on, but it is not required. It is optional. The session will be recorded, as Alicia said, so if you do not wish to appear on screen, please hide your camera. We do not actually have a Q&A button for this particular session, given that it's a workshop and we're hoping to get a little bit more interaction. So I'll invite you to either use the chat to pose questions or make comments. And I'll also invite you to pop your hand up and ask a question or take yourself off mute and engage directly with me as part of this presentation. So what I'll ask you to do is, if you do want to say something, to go to the, I forget what it's called, but the little response icon at the bottom of your screen, click on that, and then you should see the raise hand option. And if you put your hand up, you'll go to the top of my screen. I'll be able to see that, and I'll be able to call you and make sure that you're able to come off mute. And when you're not speaking, I just ask that you turn your mic off so that we don't have any interference or background noise. So let's start with acknowledgement of country. I am joining you today from the eastern suburbs of Melbourne on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I join you from today and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I would also like to extend that same respect to the traditional custodians of the lands where all of you are joining from today. And finally, I would like to welcome any First Nations people who are joining us here in the workshop today. So we'll be covering a couple of things in this workshop. The first thing that I'll describe is some common challenges that students may encounter when participating in online education. We'll propose some solutions to these common challenges, how we might address them using the universal design for learning model. And then I'll show you how I've applied strategies from Universal Design for Learning to my own online teaching practice with some illustrative examples. We'll have some opportunities for group discussion. So think about the challenges that you face in your own teaching, and then we'll try to think about how UDL might be adapted for your context to address your unique challenges. So what I would like to invite you to do now is perhaps in the chat, tell me, do you actually have any online teaching responsibilities? Or maybe you're a learning designer, maybe you work in ed tech, but if you're using online platforms in your own teaching, I would love you to share that so we can kind of see the diversity of different experiences that are in the room today. So if you'd like to go ahead and pop that in the chat while I am talking, that would be amazing. So what is online education? I thought that I would start with a definition. Online education generally refers to any instruction that's delivered electronically through various multimedia or internet platforms and applications. So the term online education might be used interchangeably with terms such as web-based learning, e-learning, computer-assisted instruction, or internet-based learning. So there's lots of different terms that may be out there to refer to this type of teaching and learning. But I'd like to start with defining some key terms that you might hear me use during this presentation. And these are all things that are relevant to my own teaching. The first term is learning management system, or LMS. A learning management system, or LMS, is essentially a software application or a platform designed to help you manage, deliver, and track educational content and activities. Usually, LMSs provide tools for instructors to create and organize courses, assignments, assessments, and to communicate with learners. LMSs may include features like discussion forums, gradebooks, content repositories, and collaborative learning tools. And some popular examples include Moodle, Canvas, Blackboard, and Google Classroom. I personally use Moodle, and I think that I'm using it to the best of its ability. I don't think it was designed specifically to be an online learning piece of software per se, but more of a repository of information. We're trying to make the best of it. If anyone has any suggestions for LMSs or platforms that they use that they love, go ahead and pop that in the chat. I've heard really good things about Canvas, but haven't used it in my own practice. Now, educational technology, or ed tech, encompasses a wide range of tools, technologies, and strategies that can be used to enhance and facilitate learning and teaching. So this might include both hardware, like the actual computer or tablet, or, for example, interactive whiteboards, or software, things like educational apps, simulations, and online platforms. So ed tech is a whole bunch of different things that aim to improve the engagement, accessibility, and effectiveness of education by leveraging technology. But ed tech can be really overwhelming. Synchronous learning refers to a mode of education in which the instructors and learners engage in real-time but online interactions. So this might be done through things like live online classes, video conferencing, webinars, or virtual meetings. So there's immediate feedback, real-time discussion, and collaborative activities amongst participants. So very similar to what we're doing here today. Now, asynchronous learning involves educational activities that don't require that real-time interaction. So these might be considered self-paced learning activities where learners engage with course material, assignments, and discussions on their own time and at their own pace. And this can be really well suited for students with really varied needs, such as busy schedules or significant responsibilities outside of school, because it allows for flexibility in how learners access the content. So asynchronous learning activities might take the form of pre-recorded lecture videos, discussion boards, reading different readings, different self-paced modules, different online quizzes. I use a mix of both synchronous and asynchronous learning activities, which are all provided to students on Moodle, my LMS, and I use a limited number of ed tech apps and programs. So bringing it all together. Okay, so online learning has many benefits. It can offer flexibility. It can offer convenience. In fact, I think online learning, online education has the potential to be the great equalizer. It can bring education to more people around the world than ever before. It also enables us to expand beyond traditional methods of teaching, traditional on-campus face-to-face methods of teaching. The use of technology and multimedia can provide students with new examples, explanations, activities, and means of assessment. But online education reduces that face-to-face interaction time. Less contact between teachers and students. This can make it a lonely or an isolating experience. In addition, students also often need to learn how to navigate new technology, often with little direct support, and this can result in frustration, anxiety, and confusion, and can lead to a sense of learner isolation and higher attrition. So although online learning has huge potential, we aren't realizing it yet. There's still a lot of barriers to delivering high quality, accessible online education. I want to highlight the importance of equity and inclusion. And I really like this picture that shows the difference between equality, equity, and accessibility. So post the COVID-19 pandemic, it's become clear that online education is here to stay. So we have to get better at it. We have to think about how online education is delivered in ways that promote equity and inclusion. Now, equality ensures that everyone has the same rights, opportunities, and resources. Equality is beneficial, but not sufficient. It often does not address specific needs. Equity, on the other hand, provides people with resources that fit their circumstances. It matches support to student need. But accessibility in education gives all people the same access to educational experiences, services, and information, and ensures that perhaps students with disability or with students with diverse learning needs can access online education on the same basis as their peers without the need for reactive accommodations. To address issues surrounding equity and accessibility in the online learning space, our team, have adopted UDL and have used it in ways that we think have been quite successful. However, getting started with UDL is tricky. You might be tempted to start by completely redesigning your course to incorporate UDL, and that can feel overwhelming. The easiest way is often by starting small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes. What I want you to do is think about whether you can identify a pinch point in your own teaching. Now, I recognize that you might not be a lecturer teaching a whole unit in tertiary education. You might be working in diverse contexts. But what's a pinch point with respect to delivering high quality education services to students in your context? A pinch point, great question, Cassandra. A pinch point is an aspect of a unit where students or consumers often struggle. You might think about, where do your students or consumers often have questions? Where do they often get things wrong on tests or assignments? Where do they always ask for different explanations? Where do they always have a hard time and get stuck? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and I want you to think about a pinch point that you've experienced in your work. Now, what I'll ask you to do is I'll ask you to think about your pinch point and then tell me about it, or go ahead and type it in the chat. Katya, building on your example of engagement, one pinch point that I'm currently experiencing in my own teaching is getting a lot of active student engagement during our real-time synchronous tutorials. Sometimes to me, it feels that the students want to keep their cameras and microphones off and want me to just talk at them for an hour. But my vision is for those tutorials to be really interactive and have a lot of discussion, a lot of active student participation. So that for me is a pinch point. I'll come back to that at the end and tell you about some of the strategies that I'm using to address that specific pinch point. But I'd like to invite anyone who'd like to take themselves off mute, put your hand up and tell me about a specific pinch point that you are currently experiencing or that you have experienced in the past. While I'm seeing if anyone puts their hand up, I'm just looking at the chat. So I agree, building relationships can be really tricky, Jackie, in an online learning environment. Sometimes it can be difficult to motivate students to complete their assignments or online activities. Karen, that's a good one. Where to find information. Often students tell the instructors that they're confused, they're lost, and they don't know where to find things. That's definitely a pinch point that I've seen. Feeling comfortable and confident with their assessment tasks, feeling that they have all the information they need to be able to do their assessments. Tony, what have you experienced?
Hi. Yeah, one of
Hi.
the things that I have found most difficult in teaching online is when trying to have, as you say, a real-time conversation with a group of students. Basically, you get what should be, you know, a conversation turning into a lecture because I'm the only one speaking.
So we get a little bit of a one-sided conversation, also known as a lecture.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Does anyone have ideas about why we might get more resistance to active participation online? And I agree, I end up talking too much as well.
Exactly the same reason as what we're seeing today. It's easier to stay quiet.
It is, Merritt, thank you. And I think it's kind of like groupthink. You know, like when we have a lot of people who are all turning off their mics and cameras and only communicating via the chat, then maybe everybody feels more comfortable doing that. But now that more people, thank you, Tony, are starting to put their hands up, perhaps we can get a little bit more, more active engagement. Allison, what do you think?
I have a theory, I hope my volume's coming through, that when you're online, you don't have your peripheral vision. So when you go into a class or a real setting, you can look around, you can kind of judge, potentially not in a good way, but in a good way, about the people who might be similar to you, might think like you, look like you. Whereas online, you don't know anything about anybody. You can't see anybody else. And so what I do is I'll actually try and get in online at least 10 or 15 minutes beforehand and have a question up on the screen that's got nothing to do with education. It's about getting to know my students. And within about 3 or 4 weeks, they feel comfortable enough because they get to hear about each other, about things, not just about, you know, do I know the theory of something, but okay, that person tells funny jokes or that person likes cooking cakes. So I can then build up a visual, a virtual peripheral vision of who else is in that class with me.
Very cool. So like the fear of not knowing who your classmates are and if they will buy into what you have to say, if they're part of your group. I love that. And I do something similar at the very beginning of the semester with our Get to Know Each Other forum on Moodle. I actually pose a question. One of my favorite questions is, if you could go on an all expenses paid trip anywhere in the world, where would you go and why? And I get them to tell me something cool about themselves. And I'm in there and I say, wow, that sounds amazing. Put me in your suitcase and take me with you. And it gets people talking to each other. Next to Rebecca.
Hi, I just thought I'd share with you why I didn't immediately jump in and found it hard just now. I felt like I didn't have time to think.
I'm like trying to keep this moving at too fast of a pace. Awesome. That's great. I mean, the way the instructor engages with participants can actually be the barrier. So really, really good point. Thank you for sharing that. Katya.
Hi. Yeah, I'll just clarify the point on engagement. And I was referring to asynchronous courses or courses that are whatever activity is fully done online, maybe not the whole course. So we have noticed that a lot of lecturers, educators kind of fall onto discussion forums for their weekly engagements. And very often they are repetitive and monotonous, having the same type of activity, list of questions, which are pretty much checking understanding, or some very vague questions when you really don't know what you're supposed to say, or giving huge tasks which will make a good half of a proper course paper or something. So they're just impossible to complete.
Yeah, you have to be really small, like small bits of things that they can do, really clear instructions on what exactly they're needing to do to engage with the activity, and make it crystal clear so people actually have the information they need to be able to engage, which is really, really important. Very, very good.
And we have started, maybe training or giving little sessions on giving feedback, because we can see from the engagement statistics that usually these discussion forums die out after 2 or 3 weeks, because there is pretty much no feedback from educators. So they're kind of sending messages into space.
Yes.
What's
out
the point?
into the ether. Yes. So I love that. That's a great thing to think about, is how can you coach your students on how to engage with each other and give feedback to each other to really promote those interactions. Very cool. And one more, Stephanie.
Thanks, Erin. Just wanted to talk about like the Tuckman's model. Like if you've got a small group, like a tutorial, you might still be in the storming phase. So may not have established who's who in the group, or if they feel comfortable enough to speak up, or there might be louder voices drowning everyone else out, or indeed in chat or in the forums. I was a Monash student, so I'm quite familiar with how Moodle's used, and definitely in the forums felt as students like, well, I can't really add anything more. Everyone said everything already.
Very good. Yeah. So I think we need to know more about the student experience and actually be soliciting more feedback from our students and using that to be really strategic and informing improvements and where we target our efforts with UDL. Very good. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I'm going to move ahead in the interest of time, but we're going to come back and visit our pinch points at the end. So keep them in the back of your head. So universal design for learning means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I think one of the tricky things about UDL is that sometimes it feels hard to have kind of a concise definition about what it actually is. For those of you that are interested in a little bit of history, in 2008, the UDL guidelines were published by CAST, which is a nonprofit education research and development organization in the USA. And the UDL guidelines were designed to provide concrete and practical examples of ways that learners might be able to access and participate more so in education. And so the UDL guidelines are supported by research and learnings and feedback from the fields of education, psychology, and learning science, amongst others, such as disability and education technology and digital learning. And they're continually updated to provide more equity in education. And gosh, that is a lot of stuff to have to become an expert in to feel like you can use UDL. So I kind of say, well, cut the fluff. Like, let's get rid of all that theory stuff. We don't really need it to be able to use UDL well. At their core, we might think about UDL as simply a proactive way to reduce barriers to learning and participation. We don't have to be experts in research findings from all these different fields of study, and we don't necessarily have to be experts on the CAST UDL guidelines. But what we do need to do is we need to think about how can we proactively design learning experiences so that they're more accessible for students in the first instance. So when I apply UDL, I think about what are the things that I'm going to do to create the learning experience before the students ever set foot in the classroom. And by that, I mean access the virtual learning environment. And so I'm going to provide some examples from my own teaching of how I've done this. And I've really kind of drawn my approach from findings in peer-reviewed literature about what students say is hard for them when they participate in online education, as well as the feedback that I've received from my own students. So I've developed what I call my 7-step blueprint to designing inclusive online learning using the principles of universal design for learning. So I consider this to be a blueprint, not a specific teaching strategy, and not a piece of educational technology. So the first step is that I focus on creating a logical layout of content on the LMS using a structure that is clear, consistent across units, and easy to navigate. What you see here is a picture of my kind of landing page on Moodle, where we have some buttons at the top, quick links for things that students may need to access, and then the information presented in topic blocks down below. And each topic block has a clear header, so students know what they'll find in that particular section. This clear and intuitive structure helps reduce cognitive load for students. In other words, it can reduce the amount of time that students spend searching for content, and it helps them to get started engaging with the content right away. Laying it out in a really logical and clear way can reduce frustration and anxiety for students. And I will tell you, it has the added benefit of reducing the number of emails that you get from confused students. So on the back end, it actually reduces workload for instructors and teaching associates. So this directly can alleviate some of the challenges that students experience related to navigating the online learning environment. Second, I create a section at the very tippity top of Moodle in the very first content block called Unit Information to orient students to Moodle and how to find things. So I do this by creating what you see on the right-hand side of the screen, a video tour of Moodle. I actually video record myself going through all of the different topic blocks on Moodle and showing students what they can find in each of those different sections. And I've titled this video, Watch Me First. So it's clear to students that this is the first thing that they should do when they step into the LMS at the beginning of the semester. The video tour also gives me an opportunity to welcome students to the unit, and it can provide a little bit of an opportunity to help students feel more connected to the unit instructor. Again, with the video tour, we're trying to help students find what they need quickly, so their time is spent less on searching for material and more on learning and engaging with the unit content. I also include something here called a Getting Started book. In each, so this is using the books feature on Moodle. A book is essentially a tool that you can open, and it's broken down into chapters. So what's circled here on the right-hand side of the screen is the title of each chapter. And students can click through these different links to read the different chapters within the book. And each title provides information about what will be presented in the text. And so I use the Getting Started book to present an overview of the unit level learning objectives, what students should be doing each week, a little checklist, the needed textbooks for the unit, frequently asked questions, and other specific information that might normally be presented in a syllabus. And we don't replicate this information anywhere else. We actually don't have separate syllabi for our units in education anymore. I also ensure that I include a chapter specifically on how students can access additional supports provided by the university, including things like academic advising, disability support services, language and literacy support, physical and mental health support, and tech support. This helps ensure that students who do need additional support above and beyond that provided proactively by the lecturers know who to contact. And this, again, can help address the identified challenge of students not knowing where to go to get that extra help and support. Navigating a university-wide website can be really overwhelming. So I actually provide this information in one easy to access spot on my Moodle site. I always end my Getting Started book with clear instructions to the students on what to do next. And I'm very specific. And this can go a long way toward alleviating potential student frustration, confusion, anxiety about, I don't know how to get started this semester. What do I do first? So what I want them to do is introduce themselves in the Introduce Yourself forum, have a look at the reading list, meet the teaching team, and direct them to begin working through the content for week 1. Another thing that's really important is to think very carefully about how you will set up the learning activities to students in a way that's easy to navigate and intuitive. So what I mean by that is under each topic block, so each topic block corresponds to one weekly topic, and there's 12 of them to correspond with the 12 weeks of the semester. We give it a clear title with the topic for that week. Then we present information to students in the same format. And this minimizes, again, the likelihood of students feeling lost. Everything is going to look the same every week to them and across all of the units within our course. And again, this can help decrease anxiety, allow them to get started with their learning right away, and helps reduce the number of emails that you receive from confused students. So we always start, again, this is this idea of chunking small bits of information. We always start with a week at a glance that tells students what we're going to cover this week. What's a general overview of the topic? Then we provide a set of topic level learning objectives that are aligned to the bigger unit level learning objectives. But these topic level objectives are more specific and detailed. We also provide the students with a list of key terms that they should be on the lookout for and be able to define by the end of the week. And this could just help guide their attention to relevant concepts when doing the readings and engaging with the weekly content. We then align learning objectives to the weekly learning activities. So I think this idea of constructive alignment is really, really important when using UDL. So because our units are primarily online, we need to think about the way that we will create sort of little mini lessons for students with interactive content, but that they know what the purpose of the content is. They know how the content we're presenting online will help them achieve the learning objectives for the unit, and how the learning objectives are aligned to the assessment tasks, and what types of things they need to know to do well on the assessment tasks. And so to do this, we also use the books feature on Moodle. This slide shows an example of how the learning activities book is presented on the Moodle sort of landing page. So each week, this is week 3, learning activities book has its own little section. Clicking in to open the learning activities book is analogous to stepping into the classroom. And here the book is broken down into a series of chapters, again, as seen circled on the right-hand side of the screen. And each chapter title is actually one of the topic level learning objectives for the week. And then below the title, we create a set of learning activities for the students. The reason that we title each chapter with the actual topic level learning objective is to strengthen the alignment between the learning activities, the learning objectives, and the assessment task to really help students see the purpose of different types of learning activities. And then we create the activities. So we populate each chapter with content aligned to that specific learning objective. So in the example here, the content is broken down into kind of an overview section that provides a text introduction to the topic, a video lecture on the topic, and then an interactive knowledge check, which allows the students to quiz themselves on the key concepts that were presented within the lecture and receive immediate embedded feedback on their responses. So when designing these learning activities, this is where we think about the principles of universal design for learning. So the first principle is that the instructor should provide students with multiple means of representation of course content. So learners might differ in the ways that they perceive and comprehend information. Some might prefer text, while others might prefer videos or pictures. So you might consider using a couple of different examples, such as a textbook chapter, a video, a TED Talk, a blog post, a graphic, or a link to a website when presenting content to students. Now, you don't need to provide every single means of representation for every concept, but it's a good idea to select a few for each. And again, in the spirit of constructive alignment, it's critical to ensure the content is directly and explicitly linked to the learning outcome. The next principle is that we should provide students with multiple ways to engage with the content. So there's a lot of different things that can influence how students learn, including their neurology, their culture, their language, the relevance of the content, and their background knowledge. Some learners might love spontaneous pop quizzes, whereas others would be really anxious by anything like that. So we need to provide different ways for students to engage with the material and actually actively respond. So again, just some examples of ways that you might do this. You might provide little embedded knowledge checks with immediate feedback, quizzes at the end of a topic, a discussion forum activity, having students write a reflection, using wikis. So wikis can be used to promote group activities, a group task, or have them work on a component of the assessment task, just one small component as a bit of a post-class activity. So again, here it's important to think about what is it that you want students to demonstrate with their learning. For example, if you want your students to be able to explain a concept, then a discussion forum activity in which they write a written response to a scenario or a problem could be a suitable option. But if you want your students to identify a concept, a multiple choice quiz might be more appropriate. And finally, the third principle is that we should provide our students with multiple means of action and expression. And so when we're designing our learning objectives, we can think about ways to include a lot of different action verbs within our learning objectives. And these are the types of things that we might assess on the assessment tasks that we design. So we might ask students to do different things like identify, explain, analyze, and do. And we need to think about how we design our assessments to actually ensure that we're assessing these types of skills. So just coming to the end of my talking here, we also want to ensure that we can engage with our students in multiple ways. And I think it's through getting a bit creative and thinking a little bit outside the box with how we might engage with our students that we can build those relationships and build the students' comfort and confidence with interacting with us in the online space. And so there's lots of different ways that we try to make our presence sort of visible within the unit, even though it's delivered asynchronously online. So we use, well, this is, I guess, the synchronous example. We do host a synchronous weekly tutorial to review concepts and link concepts, primarily link concepts to real world practical application. We do a couple of things. We use polling. So we try to get students to respond to some little multiple choice questions. They seem to really like that. We also try to ask open-ended questions. So use questioning to try to get students interacting. We encourage people to take themselves off mute and talk or type into the chat. Lots of different ways to do that. And what we can do through these interactive activities is we can identify if the students are developing fluency with the material. In other words, they're developing the ability to quickly respond or respond correctly to different types of questions about what we're teaching. And if we identify that students are struggling, then we can pause and we can provide some additional instruction. We also use post-class discussion forums. And somebody had mentioned in a previous chat, or was it this one? The days blurring together, about actually teaching students how to give feedback to each other so that in discussion forums, you can facilitate higher quality interactions between students. But I really like using discussion forums to actually have students extend what they're learning about to solve a problem. By giving them a sort of either an ethically tricky scenario or a practice challenge, it gets them thinking about how they might apply what they're learning in their practice outside of the context of the classroom. And finally, we use Moodle analytics. This can be a little bit trickier to learn, but they're not that complicated. But the way that we do this is we put completion settings next to all of our activities on Moodle. Now, we can't do it for all of them, but the ones where we can. And we teach students what those completion settings mean, how to achieve them, and to look for those little green ticks that show up on their progress trackers when they've completed the activity. And so they actually learn how to use those built-in progress trackers to self-monitor their completion of the online learning activities. We're able to monitor the online learning activity completion and check in with students at various points in the semester who may be falling behind or who may be struggling, and reach out to them and see if they need some extra support. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip the section on accessibility, but just some basic strategies on the slides, which we'll send around to everybody. Now I want to come back to the discussion that we had at the beginning. We talked about pinch points and some of the pinch points that you've experienced in your own teaching. Now I want to think about this idea of plus ones. So a plus one approach is a way to think of how you're teaching, the materials that you give your students, the ways that students can interact with you and each other, and the assignments that you ask them to do. And think about how you might add one more option for students to engage, to demonstrate their learning, and to be successful. So you might think about providing one more way students can access or view materials, one more way that you can engage them in their learning, one more way that you can make the online navigation more intuitive, one more way that students might communicate with you and with each other. And so gradually adding in plus ones can be a really helpful way to start to embed UDL as kind of a process and a journey rather than as an all or nothing activity. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. It's not a lot of time, I'm sorry, but I want you to think about what is a plus one that you might take into your own teaching or that you've tried in the past, you've used in the past to address your own pinch point. So have a think about that. And then you're welcome to either pop your ideas in the chat or put your hand up and let me know what comes to mind. Now, this is going to be annoying because I generally don't like to talk and ask people to think at the same time because, you know, cognitive load and all that. But I will say the issue that I was having with getting students to actively engage in the live synchronous tutorials and how to get more active participation so that it doesn't become a lecture. So the first thing that I do is I start with really easy questions to kind of get them comfortable with responding. You don't want to put them on the spot with something that's like super difficult that like they're going to be really worried that they may not know the right answer. So we start with something kind of easy and the stakes are really low. And then we get them kind of comfortable with talking and engaging. Then I might start with some close-ended questioning where I actually have some response options on the slide. And all they need to do is put in the chat, do they think it's A, B, C, or D? And we do a couple of those polling type things. And that seems, again, like a little bit more lower stakes. Then what we do is move to more open-ended questioning or sharing examples from their own experiences. And I have to, again, as this came up before, I think Rebecca mentioned it, I have to shut up and give them the chance to think before I expect them to respond. So I have to get comfortable with including some awkward pausing in my tutorials and being okay with the silence. And then people will generally start to offer more. Now I'm okay with people typing into the chat as we're doing here today, or putting their hand up and talking, you know, talking to everyone in the class. Those are some of the things that I've done that have gotten more active engagement happening within those online tutorials. I'm just looking at some of the points here that people have raised. Oh, I like the theme. It's really clever. Respond to a question using, so multiple means of responding to discussion questions can be really helpful. Simplify options and be explicit. Yeah, that's really helpful. Peter, what would you like to add?
Hello there. Hello, Erin, and thanks. It's great joining you here. One thing I've experienced in the past with Moodle, Canvas and Blackboard is I embed a Padlet in there. I don't know if you're familiar with Padlet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great way to either review a topic or make new relationships, learning relationships in the classroom, even if they're remote. You can go online and get them to do that anytime, and they really enjoy that. It's a great resource, and I use that for almost every week for my topics.
Yeah, that's great. I think with things like Padlet or other tools or pieces of educational technology, I guess I haven't explored too many of them besides what's embedded within Moodle. But I think if, like what you mentioned, if you can pick one that works
you just embed it in Moodle and your LMS, and it works wonders. It really does.
And then run with it. Use it.
And they can upload pictures or upload samples of their work, share their learning or something. Yeah, it's really
I love that. I mean, that's a great +1 for me to take away from this presentation, is to look at Padlet, because it's not something that I've used, but there could be a lot of utility with that. So really, really good reflection. Thank you for that. Helder, hi. Okay, let me look at your question. You utilize the option for students to complete the asynchronous part of the course at their own pace. How do you manage in the weekly synchronous meetings the fact that not all students are in the same course unit? Can students progress faster in the course than initially estimated? Yeah, so I think what you're getting at is, are now the students, because they're working on the asynchronous component at different paces, is it possible that some students are on to week 9 and they've really jumped ahead, whereas other students are still working through week 3? Yes, that is potentially a challenge that we've encountered. One of the ways that we've dealt with that is that we don't necessarily open up all subsequent weeks at the beginning of the semester. We actually put dates on them, and they automatically open a few weeks before we're meant to be on that topic, so that we don't have students that are getting too far ahead of the group. But usually by about mid-semester break, we open all of it, because we do recognize that some students will want to sort of move through things at their own pace. So we don't want to prevent students from getting ahead too much. The other thing is on Moodle. Each week when we have the tutorial, we provide a clear description of what we're going to be discussing in that evening's tutorial. And we ensure that that evening's tutorial, the material we cover, is related to that weekly topic. And so we also make sure students know that when we're coming in this week, we're talking about this topic. We're not going to start talking about whatever's on the agenda for week 12. So we can't prevent students from kind of getting apart from each other with the self-paced component, but we try to manage their expectations about what's going to happen within that tutorial. Good question. So I think we only have a few more minutes to go, so I'll just open it up for any other comments or questions. Particularly anything more about +1s that might be coming to mind. Are any other questions that you might have about applying UDL in the online space? I think one of the biggest learnings for me has been ask students to do things through your asynchronous online learning activities. Like, ask them to do things that matter. Ask them to engage in activities that serve a clear purpose and that will help them achieve the learning objectives, and design assessments as best you can that actually allow students to demonstrate the learning objectives. If you can get that constructive alignment piece looking really good, then I see a lot of engagement with the activities on Moodle, because students can really benefit from the learning and how they apply that learning to their assessment tasks. So at Monash, we don't have an attendance policy. We can't mandate that they attend the live classes or anything. So we have to think about how are we going to motivate them to participate in the learning activities when we can't make it mandatory, for example. And so alignment to the assessment tasks and designing really, really good quality assessment tasks that assess the important things that you want students to know, I guess, to say and do when they leave the unit, has proven really helpful for us. So I think we probably only have about 2 more minutes. So thanks everyone for being here that's had to head out, but I will just pause for a second and see if anyone else has any questions.
Thank you, Erin. I think if there are no further questions, we will allow a 2-minute early mark. That was a wonderfully engaging and very, very informative workshop. It's a lot of information, I think, to digest, but as you said, breaking it down into just one thing to focus on at a time is a great strategy. I would invite everyone, if you have a moment, use your 2 minutes or 1 minute now wisely and head back to the lobby to check out your sessions for the day after tomorrow. So we'll be back with the symposium again, part 2 on Thursday. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Erin, and have a wonderful evening.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much.